The worst part wasn't watching my wife dance with another man at our friend's wedding reception. The worst part was realizing I'd been watching this same dance for months without knowing it. I stood at the edge of the dance floor, nursing my third whiskey and watching Brooke Turner, my wife of 8 years, wrap her arms around Liam Prescott's neck like she was drowning and he was the only life preserver in the Atlantic. They swayed to some sappy love song, her head tilted back in laughter at whatever charming bullshit he was whispering in her ear. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Jesus, Miles, you look like someone pissed in your cornflakes, Cal Murphy said, appearing at my elbow with 2 fresh beers. Cal was my partner at the firehouse, built like a brick shithouse and about as subtle as a house fire. He'd been watching me watch them for the better part of an hour. Just enjoying the show, I said, accepting the beer. The whiskey had already done its work, loosening the knot in my chest that had been tightening all evening. Tell me something, Cal. When your wife dances with other men, does she usually grind against them like she's trying to start a fire? Cal followed my gaze to where Brooke and Liam were now pressed so close together you couldn't slide a dollar bill between them. Her hands were in his hair, his hands were dangerously low on her back, and they were looking into each other's eyes like they were the only 2 people in the room. Ah, shit, Cal muttered. How long has this been going on? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I took a long pull of beer, my eyes never leaving my wife. But I'm starting to think I've been the last to know for quite a while. Across the room, Harriet Walsh, Brooke's supposed best friend, was watching the dance floor with barely concealed glee, her phone out and recording. Every few seconds, she'd lean over to whisper something to the woman next to her, both of them giggling like schoolgirls sharing dirty secrets. The song ended, but Brooke and Liam didn't separate. If anything, they moved closer, her lips near his ear, as she said something that made him throw his head back and laugh. His hand slid up to cup the back of her neck in a gesture so intimate it might as well have been a kiss. That's when something cold and final settled in my chest. Not rage. I'd expected rage. This was something else entirely. This was clarity. I handed my beer back to Cal and started walking toward the dance floor. The crowd parted around me like I was carrying something contagious, which maybe I was. Maybe betrayal was catching, and they could smell it on me. Miles, Cal called after me, but I was already moving. The DJ was setting up the next song when I reached the small stage where he'd set up his equipment. He was a kid, maybe 25, with too much gel in his hair and a nervous smile. Hey, can I borrow your mic for a second? I asked. I don't know, man. This is usually just for announcing the bride and groom stuff. I pulled out my wallet and laid a 50 on his table. Just for a minute. The kid looked at the money, then at my face, and handed over the microphone without another word. The feedback screech when I turned it on got everyone's attention. Conversations faded, heads turned, and the dance floor slowly cleared as couples sensed something was about to happen. Brooke and Liam finally broke apart, both of them looking up at me with expressions I'd remember for the rest of my life. Hers was pure panic. His was guilt mixed with something that might have been relief. Sorry to interrupt, I said into the mic, my voice carrying clearly across the reception hall. I just wanted to say a few words while I had everyone's attention. The bride and groom, Sarah and Tom Mitchell, were standing near the head table looking confused. Sarah had been Brooke's college roommate, which was how we'd all ended up in this tangled mess of friendships and betrayals. Tom just looked like he wanted to disappear. 8 years ago, I continued, I married a woman I thought I knew. Tonight I'm watching her dance with a man she clearly knows better than she's ever known me. The silence in the room was absolute now. Even the catering staff had stopped what they were doing to listen. Brooke was shaking her head, mouthing no over and over, but she wasn't moving toward me. She was still standing next to Liam, close enough that their shoulders were touching. "So I want to propose a toast," I said, raising my empty hand as if it held a glass. "To my wife Brooke, and to Liam Prescott, who've been giving everyone quite a show tonight. May you get exactly what you deserve." I set the microphone back on the DJ's table and walked off the stage. The kid was staring at me like I'd just set the place on fire, which, in a way, I suppose I had. Brooke finally found her voice as I reached the edge of the dance floor. "Miles, wait, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said, turning to face her. She'd followed me, leaving Liam standing alone under the disco ball like a deer in headlights. "I understand that you've been lying to me for months. I understand that half the people in this room knew about it before I did. And I understand that you just made your choice in front of everyone we know." "It's not what it looks like," she said, but her voice was weak, unconvincing even to her own ears. "Really? Because it looks like my wife is in love with another man. It looks like she has been for a while, and it looks like I'm the only asshole in the room who didn't see it coming." Harriet had materialized beside us, her phone still out and recording. "Miles, you're making a scene," she said, but there was excitement in her voice, like she was watching her favorite soap opera play out in real life. "Am I?" I looked around the room at all the faces staring back at us. Some looked shocked, others embarrassed, but more than a few looked like they were enjoying the show. Well, I'd hate to disappoint anyone. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my wedding ring. The simple gold band caught the light from the disco ball as I held it up for everyone to see. "Brooke, you want to be with Liam? Be with Liam, but you can't be with both of us." I set the ring on the nearest table, the cake table as it happened, right next to the elaborate three-tiered monstrosity that had probably cost more than my truck. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. "Miles, please," Brooke said, reaching for me, but I stepped back. "Don't. Just don't. We're done here." I turned and walked toward the exit, ignoring the whispers that followed me like smoke. Cal was waiting by the door, my jacket in his hands. "You okay, brother?" he asked as we stepped outside into the cool Maine evening. "I will be," I said, and meant it. The knot in my chest was gone, replaced by something that felt almost like relief. I really think I will be. Behind us, I could hear voices rising in the reception hall, Brooke's among them, high and desperate as she tried to explain away what everyone had just witnessed. But I was already walking toward my truck, already thinking about what came next. Because this wasn't ending. This was just getting started. I woke up on Cal's couch with a headache that felt like someone had used my skull for batting practice, and a text message from Brooke that was 17 paragraphs long. I deleted it without reading past the first line. "Miles, I can explain everything if you'll just listen." Some things didn't need explaining. Cal was already up, moving around his kitchen with the efficient movements of a man who'd spent 20 years in the Army before joining the fire department. He had coffee going and was scrambling eggs with the kind of precision he brought to everything, from fighting fires to apparently harboring fugitive husbands. "How you feeling, Romeo?" he asked without turning around. "Like I got hit by a truck driven by my own stupidity," I said, sitting up and immediately regretting it. "What time is it?" 7:30. You've got about 6 missed calls from your wife and 3 from numbers I don't recognize. Word travels fast in this town." I looked at my phone. He was right. Along with Brooke's calls, I had messages from her sister, her mother, and Tom Mitchell, the groom from last night's disaster. I turned the phone off and tossed it onto Cal's coffee table. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said, accepting the cup of coffee Cal handed me. I'm not even surprised. Deep down, I think I knew something was off for months, maybe longer. What kind of something? I thought about it, sipping the coffee and letting the caffeine start its work on my brain. Little things mostly. She started working late more often, started going out with the girls every Friday night, but when I'd ask about it the next day, she could never remember much about what they'd done. She bought new lingerie, but never wore it for me. And Liam? Liam was always around. He's been part of our friend group for years, since college. I never thought much about it because he was supposed to be dating that redhead. What's her name? Jessica. But now that I think about it, I haven't seen her in months. Cal set a plate of eggs and toast in front of me. So what's the plan? Plan? Come on, Miles. I've known you for 8 years. You don't do anything without a plan. You're the guy who reads the manual before assembling a bookshelf. You think I believe you're just going to roll over and let your wife and her boyfriend ride off into the sunset? He was right, of course. Even as I'd been walking out of that reception hall last night, my mind had been working, cataloging assets and liabilities, thinking about next steps. It's what I did. Analyze problems and find solutions. It's what made me good at my job, and it's what was going to make me very good at this. First thing, I said, cutting into the eggs. I need to talk to a lawyer. We've been married 8 years, which means she's entitled to half of everything we own. The house, my pension, my savings, all of it. That's got to hurt. It would, if I was planning to let it happen, but there are ways to protect yourself if you're smart about it. Adultery might not mean much in divorce court anymore, but it can still influence how assets get divided, especially if you can prove it's been going on for a while. Cal raised an eyebrow. You thinking about hiring a private investigator? I'm thinking I might not need to. Harriet Walsh was recording everything last night with her phone. She's been Brooke's friend for years, but I've always suspected she's the type who enjoys other people's drama a little too much. I bet if I asked nicely, she'd be happy to share what she's got. And if she won't? I smiled, and Cal actually took a step back. Then I'll have to get creative. My phone buzzed against the coffee table, vibrating with another incoming call. This time it was a number I recognized. Denise Crawford, the photographer who'd been working the wedding last night. I answered it. Miles? Thank God. I wasn't sure you'd take my call. What's up, Denise? I wanted to talk to you about last night, about what I saw, and what I photographed. I sat up straighter. I'm listening. I've been doing wedding photography for 12 years, Miles. I've got a good eye for reading people, for catching the moments they think no one's watching. And I've been watching your wife and Liam Prescott for months now, at every event, every party, every gathering. And I've got pictures. Lots of pictures. Going back to at least March, maybe earlier. Nothing X-rated, but intimate. The kind of intimate that married women shouldn't be with men who aren't their husbands. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my stomach. March. That was 5 months ago. 5 months of lies, of coming home to a woman who was kissing me hello while thinking about another man. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because what I saw last night wasn't fair. The way they humiliated you in front of everyone. It wasn't right. And because I think you deserve to know the truth about how long this has been going on. What do you want in return? There was a pause. Nothing. I believe in marriage, Miles. I believe in fidelity. And I believe that people who break those vows should face consequences. Can you email me what you've got? Already done. Check your inbox in about 5 minutes. She hung up, and I looked at Cal, who'd been listening to my side of the conversation with growing interest. Let me guess, he said. Things just got interesting. Things just got very interesting. My phone rang again. This time, it was Tom Mitchell. Miles, man, I'm so sorry about last night. Sarah and I had no idea. It's not your fault, Tom. You and Sarah didn't do anything wrong. Still, we feel terrible. Is there anything we can do? I thought about it. Tom was a good guy, solid and dependable. He was also a bank manager, which meant he understood money and how it moved. More importantly, he was married to Sarah, who'd been Brooke's college roommate. If anyone knew the details of Brooke and Liam's relationship, it would be Sarah. Actually, I said, there might be. Can you and Sarah meet me for lunch today? There are some things I need to ask about. Of course, whatever you need. After I hung up, Cal was looking at me with something that might have been admiration. You know what you're doing, don't you? I'm learning, I said, but I'm a fast learner. My laptop chimed with an incoming email, Denise's photos. I opened the attachment and started scrolling through them, Cal looking over my shoulder. The first few were innocent enough, Brooke and Liam at various social gatherings, standing closer together than necessary, but nothing obviously inappropriate. But as the timeline progressed, the images became more damning. Liam's hand on the small of Brooke's back, Brooke leaning into Liam's shoulder while I was across the room talking to someone else. The two of them sharing what looked like private jokes, their heads bent together in conversation. And then there were the photos from last night. The dancing, yes, but also moments before and after. Brooke touching Liam's face with a tenderness she hadn't shown me in months. Liam's hands in her hair, the two of them looking at each other like they were the only people in the world. Damn, Cal said softly. Yeah. I closed the laptop and stood up. I need to shower and change clothes. Then I need to make some calls. What kind of calls? The kind that are going to make my wife and her boyfriend very, very sorry they decided to humiliate me in front of half the town. Cal grinned. Now you're talking my language. As I headed toward his bathroom, I was already making mental lists. Lawyer first, then the bank to protect what assets I could. Then lunch with Tom and Sarah to find out exactly how long this affair had been going on and who else knew about it. But most importantly, I needed to start documenting everything. Because if Brooke thought she was going to walk away from this marriage with half of everything I'd worked for while she'd been screwing around behind my back, she was about to learn just how wrong she could be. The water in Cal's shower was scalding hot, but it felt good against my skin. It felt like washing away the old Miles Turner, the naive, trusting husband who'd been played for a fool. What emerged from that shower was someone else entirely, someone who was done being anyone's victim, someone who was ready to fight back. Tom and Sarah were already at Murphy's Diner when I arrived, huddled in a corner booth with the shell-shocked expressions of people who'd witnessed a car accident. Sarah had been crying. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she kept dabbing at them with a tissue. Miles, she said, as I slid into the booth across from them. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. For what? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. For not telling you sooner, for not... God, I should have said something months ago. Tom reached across the table and squeezed his wife's hand. We didn't know how, he said. We kept hoping it would just... stop. That Brooke would come to her senses. The waitress came over, Betty, who'd been serving coffee and gossip at Murphy's for as long as anyone could remember. She looked at me with the kind of sympathy usually reserved for terminal patients. The usual, Miles? She asked. Just coffee, thanks. After she left, I leaned forward and looked directly at Sarah. How long have you known? Sarah's face crumpled. Since March, maybe earlier. I walked in on them at that party Harriet threw for her birthday. They were in the kitchen and they were kissing. Really kissing. When they saw me, Brooke begged me not to say anything. She said it was just a moment of weakness, that it didn't mean anything, that she was going to end it. But she didn't. No. If anything, it got worse. They started being more careful around you, but around everyone else. She shook her head. Miles, they were acting like a couple, finishing each other's sentences, sharing inside jokes, touching each other constantly. It was obvious to anyone who was paying attention. Who else knew? Tom and Sarah exchanged a look. Most of our friend group, Tom said reluctantly. Harriet definitely knew. I think she was actually encouraging it. She always said you and Brooke weren't right for each other, that Brooke needed someone more exciting. What about Liam's girlfriend, Jessica? They broke up in February, Sarah said. He told everyone it was mutual, but Jessica told me later that he'd been emotionally distant for months before that. She suspected he was interested in someone else, but she never knew who. I sipped my coffee, processing this information. February. So Liam had ended his relationship to be available for my wife, and my wife had been carrying on an affair for at least 6 months, possibly longer. There's something else, Sarah said quietly. Last month at the Hendersons' barbecue, I overheard Brooke and Liam talking about you, about how they were going to handle things. Handle things how? Brooke said she was waiting for the right time to ask for a divorce. She said she wanted to make sure she got her fair share of everything, and that she needed to be smart about it. Liam was telling her about some lawyer he knew, someone who specialized in protecting women's interests in divorce proceedings. The cold feeling in my stomach spread outward until it reached my fingertips. They'd been planning this. While I'd been going to work every day, fighting fires and saving lives, my wife had been plotting to leave me and take half of everything I owned in the process. Did they say anything else? Tom nodded grimly. Liam said something about how you'd probably be reasonable about the whole thing, that you weren't the type to fight dirty or make things difficult. I almost laughed. Is that right? Miles, Sarah said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But please, don't do anything you'll regret. Brooke made a terrible mistake, but she's not a bad person. Maybe if you two could just talk. Talk? I pulled my hand back. Sarah, my wife has been cheating on me for at least 6 months. She's been planning to divorce me and take half of everything I own. And last night, she humiliated me in front of everyone we know by dancing with her lover like I didn't exist. What exactly is there to talk about? She loves you, Sarah said weakly. No, I said, standing up. She loves what I can give her. The house, the financial security, the respectability of being married to a firefighter. But she loves sleeping with Liam more than she loves any of that, and now she wants to have both. Sarah flinched at my language, but I was past caring about anyone's delicate sensibilities. Thanks for the information, I said, dropping a 10 on the table. And Tom? That thing I asked you about earlier. Can you make that happen? Tom nodded. I'll make some calls this afternoon. As I walked out of Murphy's, I could feel eyes on me from every table. The story of last night's wedding disaster had clearly made the rounds, and I was now officially the most interesting thing to happen in our little town since the mayor got caught with his secretary. My phone buzzed with another text from Brooke. Miles, please call me. We need to talk. I know how this looks, but it's not what you think. I love you. I've always loved you. I deleted it without responding and called my lawyer instead. Jim? It's Miles Turner. I need to see you today. It's urgent. Jim Hartley had handled the legal work when Brooke and I bought our house, and he'd drawn up my will a few years back. He was a good lawyer, thorough and discreet, which was exactly what I needed right now. What's going on, Miles? My wife is cheating on me, and I have reason to believe she's planning to file for divorce. I need to protect my assets. There was a pause. How sure are you about the cheating? I have photographs and witnesses. Can you be here in an hour? I'm on my way. The drive to Jim's office gave me time to think. Brooke and Liam thought they were so smart, planning their little strategy, assuming I'd be reasonable about the whole thing. They were counting on me being the same passive, trusting husband I'd always been. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. Jim's office was in one of the old Victorian houses downtown that had been converted to professional use. His secretary, Mrs. Chen, had known me since I was a kid. She'd gone to high school with my mother. Miles, honey, she said as I walked in. I heard about what happened last night. I'm so sorry. Word really did travel fast in a small town. Thanks, Mrs. Chen. Is Jim available? He's waiting for you. Jim Hartley was in his 60s, with gray hair and the kind of calm demeanor that came from handling other people's crises for 40 years. He gestured for me to sit down across from his desk. "Tell me everything," he said. I did. The months of suspicious behavior, the affair, last night's public humiliation, and what I'd learned from Tom and Sarah about Brooke and Liam's plans. Jim took notes, asking occasional questions, but mostly just listening. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and studied me. "What do you want to accomplish here, Miles?" "I want to make sure that when this marriage ends, and it's going to end, I don't lose everything I've worked for to a cheating wife and her boyfriend." That's reasonable. Maine is technically a no-fault divorce state, but adultery can still be a factor in property division, especially if you can prove it's been ongoing and that marital assets were used to facilitate the affair. "What do you mean?" "Hotel rooms, expensive dinners, gifts, anything your wife might have purchased for her lover using joint funds. Do you have access to your bank and credit card statements?" "Yes." "I want you to go through them with a fine-tooth comb. Look for any unusual charges, especially ones that don't make sense or that Brooke couldn't adequately explain. Also, I'm going to recommend that you immediately remove her access to any accounts where you're the primary holder." "Can I do that legally?" "As long as they're accounts that were opened in your name, yes. You'll want to do it quickly, though, before she realizes what's happening and tries to clean them out." Jim handed me a business card. "This is a private investigator I work with sometimes. His name is Rick Santos. He's expensive, but he's very good at documenting extramarital affairs. I might not need him. I already have photographs, and I think I can get more information from people who've been watching this develop. Even better, the more evidence you have, the stronger your position will be." Jim stood up. "Miles, I have to ask, are you sure you want to go down this road? Divorce is ugly under the best circumstances. When you're fighting over assets and dealing with adultery, it can get very nasty very quickly." "Jim, my wife has been planning to leave me for months while pretending to love me. She's been sleeping with another man while sleeping in my bed. And last night, she humiliated me in front of half the town. I'm already in a war. I just didn't know it until now." Jim nodded slowly. "All right then. Let's make sure you win it." As I left Jim's office, I felt something I hadn't felt since walking out of that wedding reception. Control. For months, maybe longer, other people had been making decisions about my life without my knowledge. Brooke had decided she wanted someone else. Liam had decided he wanted my wife. My friends had decided to keep their mouths shut and let me live in ignorance. But now, I was making the decisions. And the first decision was that if Brooke wanted a war, she was going to get one. The second decision was that I was going to make sure she lost. I spent the rest of the afternoon at the bank with Tom, moving money around like pieces on a chessboard. Tom had called ahead and spoken with his manager, explaining the situation in the kind of careful professional language that bankers used when they were helping someone protect their assets from a cheating spouse. The joint checking account had about $12,000 in it, Tom said as we sat in his office reviewing the paperwork. "I've moved $8,000 to a new account in your name only. I left enough to cover the mortgage and utilities for this month, but she won't be able to clean you out. What about the savings? That's trickier. Since both your names are on it, she has legal access to all of it. But I've put a flag on the account that will notify you of any large withdrawals. If she tries to take more than $500 at once, you'll get a text message immediately. And my pension? She can't touch that without a court order, but I'd recommend you contact the fire department's benefits office and make sure they know about the pending divorce. You'll want to remove her as your beneficiary as soon as possible." I signed the last of the forms and shook Tom's hand. "I owe you for this." "You don't owe me anything. What Brooke did, it wasn't right. Sarah's been crying all day about it." As I left the bank, my phone buzzed with a text from Cal. "Where are you? Brooke showed up at the firehouse looking for you. Captain Ruiz wants to see you." Shit. I'd forgotten that I was supposed to be on shift today. In all the chaos of the last 24 hours, work had been the last thing on my mind. The firehouse was only a few blocks away, so I walked. It gave me time to prepare for whatever was waiting for me. Captain Ruiz was a fair man, but he didn't tolerate drama interfering with the job. If Brooke had made a scene, she was gone by the time I arrived, but I could tell from the looks on my colleagues' faces that her visit had been memorable. Cal met me at the door. "How bad?" I asked. "Bad." She was crying, begging anyone who'd listen to tell her where you were. She kept saying it was all a misunderstanding, that she could explain everything if she could just talk to you. What did Ruiz say? He told her this wasn't the place for personal problems and asked her to leave. But Miles, she didn't go quietly. She made a scene, started yelling about how everyone was turning against her, how no one understood what really happened. I rubbed my forehead, feeling a headache starting behind my eyes. Where is he now? His office. And Miles. He's not happy. Captain Eduardo Ruiz had been running our firehouse for 15 years. He was a small, compact man with graying hair and the kind of quiet authority that came from years of making serious decisions under pressure. When I knocked on his office door, he looked up from his paperwork with an expression I couldn't read. "Sit down, Turner." I sat. "You want to tell me what the hell happened last night?" I gave him the abbreviated version, my wife's affair, the public confrontation at the wedding, the end of my marriage. Ruiz listened without interrupting, his face giving nothing away. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said, when I finished. "Divorce is never easy, but when your personal life starts affecting this firehouse, it becomes my problem too. I understand, sir. It won't happen again. See that it doesn't. I don't care what's going on at home, Turner. When you're here, you're a firefighter first and everything else second. The people of this town depend on us to be ready when they need us, and I can't have my men distracted by domestic drama." "Yes, sir." Ruiz studied me for a long moment. "That said, I've known you for 8 years, and you're one of the best firefighters I've ever worked with. If you need some time to get your affairs in order, I can arrange it." "Thank you, sir, but I'd rather work. I think staying busy is probably the best thing for me right now." "All right, but Turner, if your wife shows up here again, I'm calling the police. This is a workplace, not a marriage counseling center." "Understood." I spent the rest of my shift trying to focus on routine maintenance and equipment checks, but my mind kept wandering to the next steps in what was rapidly becoming a complex campaign. By the time we were relieved at 6 p.m., I had a plan. Cal and I grabbed dinner at a pizza place near the firehouse, sitting in a back booth where we could talk without being overheard. "So, what's next?" Cal asked, working on his third slice of pepperoni. "I need more information about exactly what Brooke and Liam have been up to. Dates, times, places, anything that can help establish a timeline of the affair." "How are you going to get that?" I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. By asking someone who's been watching them a lot longer than I have. Harriet Walsh answered on the second ring. "Miles? Oh my God, I've been hoping you'd call. I feel so terrible about what happened last night." "Do you, Harriet?" There was a pause. "What do you mean?" "I mean you were recording everything with your phone. You looked pretty excited about the whole thing, almost like you were enjoying the show." I wasn't. "Harriet, let's cut the bullshit. You've known about Brooke and Liam for months, haven't you?" Another pause, longer this time. "Yes. And you never said anything to me because you were having too much fun watching it all play out." "Miles, that's not fair. It wasn't your place to tell me my wife was cheating, but it was your place to record my humiliation for posterity. God, when you put it like that. Here's what's going to happen, Harriet. You're going to meet me tomorrow morning at Murphy's Diner, and you're going to tell me everything you know about my wife's affair. Dates, places, conversations you overheard, all of it." "Why would I do that?" "Because if you don't, I'm going to make sure everyone in town knows that you've been encouraging and enabling an affair for months while pretending to be my friend. How do you think that's going to play with the other wives in our social circle? You wouldn't. Try me. There was a long silence. What time tomorrow? 9 a.m. And Harriet? Bring your phone. I want to see those videos you took last night. After I hung up, Cal was looking at me with something approaching awe. Damn, brother, you're getting good at this. I'm learning that people respond to incentives. Harriet's incentive is protecting her reputation as the town gossip. If I threaten that reputation, she'll do whatever I ask to preserve it. And after you talk to her? Then I start putting pressure on Liam. He's been coasting through this whole thing, thinking there wouldn't be any consequences for breaking up my marriage. It's time he learned how wrong he is. My phone buzzed with another text from Brooke. Miles, I went by the firehouse today, but you weren't there. Please, we need to talk. I know I made mistakes, but I love you. Can't we work this out? I showed the message to Cal. She's still trying to play the innocent victim. What are you going to do about it? Nothing. Radio silence is driving her crazy, and crazy people make mistakes. The more mistakes she makes, the stronger my position becomes. As we left the pizza place, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The thrill of the hunt. For too long, I'd been passive, reactive, letting life happen to me instead of taking control. But this situation was different. This was war, and I was finally fighting back. Tomorrow, I'd start gathering the ammunition I needed to destroy my wife and her lover. And by the time I was finished, they'd both wish they'd never heard my name. The old Miles Turner would have been horrified by these thoughts. But the old Miles Turner was gone, burned away in the fire of betrayal and humiliation. What remained was someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. Someone who was just getting started. Harriet was already at Murphy's when I arrived the next morning, hunched over a cup of coffee like she was trying to hide inside it. She looked up when I slid into the booth across from her, and I could see she'd been crying. Her makeup was smudged, and her usually perfect hair looked like she'd been running her hands through it. You look like hell, I said. I didn't sleep much last night. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Miles, I want you to know that I never meant for things to go this far. But you knew they were going this far, didn't you? She nodded miserably. I should have said something. I should have told you months ago. Betty came over with the coffee pot, filling my cup without being asked. She gave Harriet a curious look. Everyone in town knew that Harriet Walsh didn't cry in public unless something major was happening. So, tell me now, I said after Betty left. Everything. Harriet pulled out her phone and set it on the table between us. It started last winter, January, maybe February. Brooke and Liam were both at that Super Bowl party the Hendersons threw, and I noticed them talking in the corner for most of the night. Not talking to anyone else, just each other. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. No, but the way they were talking did. They were standing really close, and Brooke kept touching his arm when she laughed. And the way they were looking at each other. She shook her head. I've been married for 12 years, Miles. I know what attraction looks like. When did you know for sure? March. Definitely March. It was at my birthday party. You remember, you had to work that night, so Brooke came alone. I went into the kitchen to get more ice, and they were there. They were kissing, and it wasn't some innocent peck on the cheek. They were really going at it. What did you do? I cleared my throat, and they jumped apart like they'd been electrocuted. Brooke started crying, saying it was a mistake, that she'd had too much wine, that it would never happen again. Liam just stood there looking guilty. But it did happen again. Oh, yes. After that, it was like they couldn't stay away from each other. Every party, every gathering, they'd find excuses to be alone together, and when they were in the same room with other people, they had this whole secret language going, little looks, touches, inside jokes. I sipped my coffee, processing this. Who else knew? Sarah, obviously. Tom figured it out eventually. The Hendersons suspected something. Really, Miles, anyone who was paying attention could see it. But no one said anything to me. Harriet looked down at her hands. We kept hoping it would just end. That one of them would come to their senses. And honestly, some of us thought maybe you already knew and were just choosing to ignore it. Why would you think that? Because you're not stupid, Miles. And because Brooke wasn't exactly being subtle about it. The way she'd light up when Liam walked into a room, the way she'd find excuses to sit next to him at dinner parties. We couldn't understand how you weren't seeing it. The truth was, I had been seeing it. On some level, I'd known something was wrong for months, but I'd chosen to ignore the signs, to trust my wife instead of my instincts. That was a mistake I wouldn't make again. Show me the videos from the wedding, I said. Harriet hesitated. Miles, are you sure you want to see this? Show me. She scrolled through her phone and found the first video. It was from early in the evening, before the dancing started. Brooke and Liam were standing by the bar, and even though there were other people around them, they only had eyes for each other. Brooke was wearing the blue dress I'd bought her for her birthday, the one she'd said made her feel beautiful. She was laughing at something Liam had said, her hand on his chest, her face tilted up toward his. There are more, Harriet said quietly. The second video was from later in the evening. Brooke and Liam were dancing, but it wasn't the kind of dancing you did with friends. Her arms were around his neck, his hands were on her waist, and they were swaying together like they were the only two people in the world. At one point, she said something in his ear that made him pull back and look at her with an expression of such naked longing that I had to look away. And this is the one from when you made your announcement, Harriet said, starting the third video. I watched myself walk up to the DJ's booth, watched the crowd gradually realize that something was happening. I watched Brooke's face go white when she understood what I was about to do, watched Liam try to step protectively in front of her, and I watched myself calmly, methodically destroy my marriage in front of everyone we knew. Jesus, I said softly. Miles, I'm so sorry. I know how this must look, me recording all of this, but I swear I wasn't doing it to hurt you. I was just, I don't know. It was like watching a car accident in slow motion. I couldn't look away. I understood. There was something compelling about watching other people's lives fall apart, especially when you'd been watching the pieces line up for months. Harriet had had a front row seat to the destruction of my marriage, and she'd documented it like a war correspondent. I need copies of all of these, I said. What are you going to do with them? Whatever I need to do. Harriet sent the videos to my phone, then sat back and looked at me with something that might have been fear. Miles, you're scaring me a little. You're not going to do anything crazy, are you? Define crazy. I don't know. Hurt someone. Burn down their houses. Key their cars. I almost smiled. Harriet, I'm a firefighter. I put out fires. I don't start them. And I'm not going to hurt anyone physically. But if you're asking whether I'm going to let my wife and her boyfriend walk away from this without consequences, the answer is no. What kind of consequences? The kind that make them wish they'd thought twice before humiliating me in front of half the town. I stood up and dropped a 20 on the table. Thanks for the information, Harriet, and the videos. Miles, wait. She reached across the table and grabbed my arm. Please don't tell anyone that I helped you. If Brooke finds out, your secret's safe with me, as long as you keep mine. What secret? That we had this conversation. As far as anyone knows, you never talked to me about any of this. She nodded quickly. Of course. I won't say anything. As I walked out of Murphy's, I could feel the weight of my phone in my pocket. The videos Harriet had given me were damning, but they were just the beginning. I had documentation now, proof of what everyone had known but no one had been willing to tell me. But documentation was just the first step. The next step was leverage, and I knew exactly where to find it. Liam Prescott worked at a financial consulting firm downtown, the kind of white-collar job that required a clean reputation and the trust of clients. He drove a BMW, wore expensive suits, and lived in a loft apartment that probably cost more per month than most people made in salary. He also had a weakness for gambling, something I'd learned during the occasional poker games our friend group used to have. Liam always bet more than he could afford to lose, and he wasn't very good at hiding his tells when he was bluffing. I had a feeling he was about to learn that life wasn't a poker game, and I wasn't the kind of opponent who folded easily. My phone buzzed with another text from Brooke. "Miles, I know you're angry, but this silence is hurting me. Please just call me, 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking for." I deleted the message without responding and started walking toward Liam's office building. It was time for the two of us to have a conversation, a private conversation, man to man. Liam's office building was one of those sleek glass towers that had been built during the economic boom of the early 2000s, all chrome and marble and the kind of sterile corporate aesthetics that were supposed to inspire confidence in potential clients. I'd been there once before, for a Christmas party Liam had thrown for his colleagues, back when I'd still thought of him as a friend. The elevator ride to the 14th floor gave me time to rehearse what I was going to say. I'd learned from my experience at the wedding that the element of surprise was crucial. Liam wouldn't be expecting me to show up at his workplace, which meant he'd be off balance from the moment I walked through his door. The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly straight blonde hair and a smile that looked like it had been professionally installed, looked up as I approached her desk. "I'm here to see Liam Prescott," I said. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I think he'll want to see me. Tell him it's Miles Turner." She picked up her phone and dialed an extension. "Mr. Prescott, there's a Miles Turner here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says you'll want to—" "Oh, okay. I'll send him back." She hung up and pointed down a hallway lined with glass-walled offices. "Third door on the right." Liam was standing behind his desk when I walked in, his hands flat on the surface like he was bracing himself for impact. He'd always been a good-looking guy, tall, dark hair, the kind of easy smile that made people trust him. But right now, he looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past 48 hours. "Miles," he said, "I wasn't expecting you. I bet you weren't." I closed the door behind me and took a seat in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "Nice office. Business must be good." "What do you want?" "I want to have a conversation, man to man, about my wife." Liam sat down slowly, never taking his eyes off me. "Miles, I know how this must look." "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been sleeping with my wife for the better part of 6 months while pretending to be my friend." "How does it look from where you're sitting?" He flinched at my language. "It's not that simple." "Sure it is. You wanted something that belonged to someone else, so you took it. The only complicated part is that you were stupid enough to think there wouldn't be consequences." "Miles, you have to understand. I understand perfectly. You and Brooke fell in love, or lust, or whatever you want to call it. You decided that your feelings were more important than my marriage, my trust, or basic human decency. And you both assumed I'd be too weak or too stupid to do anything about it." Liam leaned back in his chair, and I could see him trying to regain his composure. This was more like the Liam I knew, smooth, confident, always looking for an angle. "What do you want, Miles? Money?" I almost laughed. "You think this is about money? Isn't it? I mean, I know the divorce is going to be expensive for you. Maybe we can work something out, help offset some of the costs." "You want to pay me for my wife?" "That's not what I meant." "No, because it sounds like you're trying to buy your way out of this situation, like you think you can write a check and make all the unpleasantness go away. I'm trying to find a solution that works for everyone. Here's the solution that works for me. You and Brooke get to be together, and I get to destroy both of your lives in the process. How does that sound?" The confident mask slipped, and for a moment I saw genuine fear in his eyes. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone and showed him one of the videos Harriet had given me. I'm talking about the fact that I have documentation of your affair going back months. Photos, videos, witness statements, everything I need to prove that you've been carrying on with a married woman. So what? Adultery isn't illegal. No, but it can still have consequences. For instance, how do you think your clients would feel if they knew you were the kind of man who seduces other people's wives? How much trust do you think they'd have in your professional judgment if they found out you've been making decisions with your dick instead of your brain? Liam's face had gone pale. You wouldn't. Try me. I've got nothing left to lose, Liam. My marriage is over, my wife chose someone else, and half the town watched it happen. But you've got a career to protect, a reputation to maintain. You've got something to lose. What do you want? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to know that you can't just take whatever you want from other people without paying a price. And what's the price? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the town spread below us. From up here, everything looked small and manageable, like pieces on a board game. I haven't decided yet, I said, but I'll let you know. I turned back to face him. In the meantime, I want you to think about something. You've been planning this whole thing with Brooke for months, haven't you? The divorce, the division of assets, the whole strategy for how to handle things. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. Brooke told Sarah that she was waiting for the right time to ask for a divorce, that she wanted to make sure she got her fair share. She also mentioned that you knew a lawyer who specialized in protecting women's interests. Ring any bells? Liam's silence was answer enough. Here's what you didn't count on, I continued. You assumed I'd be reasonable about the whole thing, that I'd roll over and let you two ride off into the sunset with half of everything I've worked for. But you made a mistake, Liam. You humiliated me in public. You made me look like a fool in front of everyone I know. Miles, I'm not finished. You see, I might have been willing to be reasonable if you'd handled this differently. If you'd come to me like a man and told me you were in love with my wife. If you'd asked for a divorce instead of sneaking around behind my back for months. But you didn't do that. You chose to lie and cheat and scheme, and then you chose to humiliate me in front of half the town. I walked back to his desk and leaned forward, my hands flat on the surface, just as his had been when I'd walked in. So now you get to find out what happens when you push a reasonable man too far. I straightened up and headed for the door. Oh, and Liam, you might want to call Brooke and tell her to stop texting me. I'm not interested in anything she has to say. Miles, wait. I turned back. What? What if we could work something out? Some kind of arrangement that would be fair to everyone? You mean like you and Brooke getting what you want and me getting screwed? That kind of arrangement? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? He was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him trying to figure out what to say, what angle to work. I meant maybe we could find a way to handle this that doesn't destroy everyone involved. You should have thought about that 6 months ago. I left him sitting behind his desk, staring at the closed door like he was trying to figure out what had just hit him. The receptionist smiled at me as I passed her desk, but I could see the curiosity in her eyes. Word would get around the office that Liam Prescott had had an unexpected visitor, and people would start asking questions. That was fine with me. Questions were the beginning of doubt, and doubt was the beginning of the end for someone in Liam's profession. As I waited for the elevator, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the satisfaction of a job well done. For too long, I'd been reactive, letting other people make decisions that affected my life. But this was different. This was me taking control, setting the terms, making the rules. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside. As the floor numbers counted down, I thought about what came next. I'd rattled Liam's cage, but that was just the opening move. The real game was just getting started, and I was playing to win. The call came at 3 in the morning. I was sleeping on Cal's couch, deep in the kind of dreamless sleep that comes from emotional exhaustion, when my phone started buzzing against the coffee table. The caller ID said, Brooke, but the voice on the other end was Liam's. Miles, you need to get down to the police station, now. I sat up, instantly awake. What happened? Brooke's been arrested. She did something stupid. What kind of stupid? She tried to break into your house. The neighbors called the cops when they heard glass breaking. I looked at the clock. 3:15 a.m. Jesus Christ. Miles, she's not thinking straight. She's been drinking and she's been crying for 2 days straight. She just wanted to get some of her things. So she decided to break a window instead of using her key? There was a pause. She said you changed the locks. I had changed the locks, the day after I'd met with my lawyer. It was one of the first things Jim had recommended. Secure the house, protect my assets, make sure Brooke couldn't remove anything valuable before the divorce proceedings began. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said. The police station was a low brick building that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd never seen an actual police station but had read about them in a book. Officer Janet Morrison was behind the desk when I walked in, her gray hair pulled back in a bun that looked like it could stop bullets. Miles, she said. I'm sorry about this. Where is she? Holding cell number 2. She's sobered up some since we brought her in, but she's still pretty upset. What's she being charged with? Breaking and entering, destruction of property. The neighbors said they heard glass breaking around midnight, saw someone moving around inside with a flashlight. When we got there, she was in the bedroom, packing a suitcase. Can I see her? Officer Morrison nodded toward a hallway lined with metal doors. Third door on the left. But Miles, she's not in a good place right now. Be careful. Brooke was sitting on the narrow bench that served as a bed in the holding cell, her head in her hands. She'd been wearing the same clothes for 2 days, jeans and a sweater that had probably been clean when she put it on, but now looked wrinkled and stained. When she looked up and saw me, her face crumpled. Miles. Oh God, Miles, I'm so sorry. What were you thinking, Brooke? I needed some things. My clothes, my jewelry, my photos. And you changed the locks, and you won't return my calls, and I didn't know what else to do. You could have called a lawyer. You could have had them arrange for you to get your belongings. I tried that. But they said it could take weeks, and I needed things now. I'm staying at Harriet's, and I don't have anything. No clothes, no makeup, nothing. I looked at my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, and felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Pity. She looked broken, desperate, like someone who'd gambled everything on a single hand and lost. Where's Liam? He went home. He said this was getting too complicated, that he needed some space to think. So he abandoned you. It's not like that. He's scared. You really rattled him yesterday. He thinks you're going to try to destroy his career. I am going to destroy his career. Brooke looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Why? Why are you doing this? I know I hurt you, but this isn't like you, Miles. You're not a cruel person. You're right. I'm not cruel. But I'm also not stupid. And I'm not weak. And I'm sure as hell not going to let you and your boyfriend walk away from this without consequences. What do you want from me? I want you to understand that choices have consequences. You chose to have an affair. You chose to lie to me for months. You chose to humiliate me in front of everyone we know. Now you get to live with the results of those choices. And what are those results? I pulled out my phone and showed her the videos Harriet had given me. These are going to be Exhibit A in our divorce proceedings, along with the financial records I've been going through, the witness statements I've been collecting, and the private investigator's report I'm having prepared. Private investigator? Did you really think I was going to take your word for how long this has been going on? I've hired someone to document everything, Brooke. Every hotel room, every restaurant, every lie you told me while you were sleeping with another man? She started crying again, the kind of ugly, desperate crying that comes from realizing you're completely screwed. Miles, please, can't we work this out? Can't we try to save our marriage? Our marriage ended the first time you kissed him. Everything since then has just been paperwork. But I love you. I've always loved you. No, you loved the security I provided. You loved the house, the financial stability, the respectability of being married to a firefighter. But you loved sleeping with Liam more than you loved any of that. She flinched like I'd slapped her. That's not fair. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that I worked double shifts to pay for the house you were bringing your lover to? Is it fair that I trusted you while you were planning to divorce me and take half of everything I own? Is it fair that you made me look like a fool in front of everyone we know? I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far, and now you get to deal with the consequences. I stood up and called for Officer Morrison. I'm ready to go. Miles, wait. Brooke grabbed the bars of the cell. What happens now? Now you call a lawyer and try to figure out how to minimize the damage. But Brooke, whatever lawyer you get, make sure they understand something. I'm not the same man you married 8 years ago. I'm not going to be reasonable. I'm not going to be generous. And I'm not going to make this easy for you. You're scaring me. Good. Maybe you should have been scared 6 months ago, before you decided to blow up our marriage. As I walked out of the police station, I felt something settle in my chest. Not satisfaction exactly, but a sense of rightness. For too long, I'd been the victim in this story. But that was changing. Now I was writing the ending. And it wasn't going to be a happy one for everyone involved. The sun was coming up as I drove back to Cal's house, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that reminded me of better times. But those times were gone now, burned away in the fire of betrayal and lies. What remained was justice, and I was just getting started. 3 weeks later, I was sitting at the bar in Murphy's Tavern, the same place where this whole mess had started to unravel, watching the evening news on the television mounted above the bottles of whiskey. The lead story was about a local financial advisor who'd been suspended pending an investigation into his professional conduct. "Turn that up, would you, Murphy?" called out one of the regulars. Murphy reached for the remote, and Liam Prescott's face filled the screen. He looked haggard, older than his 35 years, with the kind of defeated expression that comes from watching your life fall apart in public. Liam Prescott, a financial advisor with Coastal Investment Group, has been suspended following allegations of professional misconduct, the reporter was saying. According to sources within the company, Prescott is accused of using client information for personal gain and violating the firm's ethics policies regarding personal relationships. The story didn't mention me by name, but it didn't need to. Everyone in town knew exactly what had happened and why. The private investigator I'd hired had done excellent work, documenting not just Liam's affair with my wife, but also some questionable investment advice he'd given to clients who happened to be attractive women. Nothing illegal, but enough to raise serious questions about his professional judgment. "Jesus," Cal said, sliding onto the bar stool next to me. "You really did it." I told him there would be consequences. What about Brooke? That was a more complicated story. The divorce had been finalized the week before, and it hadn't gone the way she'd hoped. The evidence of her affair, combined with the fact that she'd used marital assets to fund her relationship with Liam, expensive dinners, hotel rooms, gifts, had convinced the judge to award me a significantly larger portion of our joint assets than she'd expected. She'd gotten the car and about $20,000. I'd gotten the house, my pension, and everything else we'd built together over 8 years of marriage. "She's moving to Portland," I said. "Got a job with some design firm down there. Probably for the best. Too many people here know what happened." "And Liam?" "Last I heard, he was looking for work in Boston." Turns out it's hard to find clients when everyone in town knows you can't be trusted. Murphy set a fresh beer in front of me without being asked. He was a big man with graying hair and the kind of weathered face that came from years of listening to other people's problems. "You know," he said, wiping down the bar with a rag that had seen better days, "I've been running this place for 20 years, and I've seen a lot of marriages fall apart, but I've never seen anyone handle it quite like you did." "What do you mean?" "Most guys, they either fall apart completely or they go crazy and do something stupid. You went to war, methodical, strategic, ruthless. It was like watching a chess master play against a couple of amateurs." "I had good teachers," I said, thinking about the lawyer, the private investigator, and all the people who'd helped me document my wife's betrayal. "And I had motivation." "That you did." The door opened, and Tom and Sarah Mitchell walked in. They'd been avoiding me since the divorce was finalized, probably feeling guilty about their role in keeping Brooke's affair secret. But tonight, they walked straight over to where I was sitting. "Miles," Tom said, "can we buy you a drink?" "I've got one, thanks." "We wanted to apologize," Sarah said, "for not telling you sooner, for letting it go on as long as it did." "You told me when it mattered," I said. "That's what counts. Still, we should have said something earlier. Maybe, but then I wouldn't have had time to prepare properly. Sometimes things happen exactly the way they're supposed to." Tom ordered drinks for himself and Sarah, and we sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the news cycle through its usual litany of disasters and political scandals. "So, what now?" Sarah asked. "What's next for Miles Turner?" "I'm thinking about taking some time off. Maybe travel a little, see some places I've never been. I've got enough saved up now to take a real vacation for the first time in years." "Sounds nice." "Yeah, it does." The truth was, I hadn't decided what came next. For months, my entire focus had been on the divorce, on making sure Brooke and Liam paid for what they'd done. Now that it was over, I felt strangely empty, like a soldier who'd won the war but wasn't sure what to do in peacetime. "You ever think about remarrying?" Tom asked. "Someday, maybe, but not anytime soon. I've got some trust issues to work through first." "That's understandable." Murphy turned up the volume on the television as the sports segment began. The local high school football team had made it to the state championship, and the whole town was buzzing with excitement about Friday night's game. "You going to the game?" Cal asked. "Probably. Got nothing else to do." "Good. It'll be nice to see you doing something normal for a change." "As opposed to what?" "As opposed to plotting the systematic destruction of your enemies." I almost smiled. That was just a hobby. Some hobby. As the evening wore on, more people filtered into Murphy's. Some of them nodded at me politely, others went out of their way to avoid eye contact. I'd become something of a local legend, the man who'd taken down his cheating wife and her lover with surgical precision. Some people admired what I'd done. Others were probably afraid of what I might be capable of if they crossed me. Both reactions were fine with me. Around 10 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. I almost deleted it without reading it, but something made me open it. "Miles, it's Brooke. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. For everything. You deserved better than what I gave you. I hope someday you can forgive me." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Some apologies came too late to matter. "Bad news?" Cal asked. "Just someone from my past trying to ease their conscience." "You going to respond?" "Nope. Some conversations are over before they start." I finished my beer and stood up, dropping money on the bar to cover my tab. "I'm heading home. You sure you're okay to drive?" "I'm fine. 2 beers over 3 hours doesn't even register anymore." As I walked toward the door, Murphy called out, "Miles?" "Yeah?" "For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. A man's got to stand up for himself or nobody else will." "Thanks, Murphy." The night air was cool and crisp, with the kind of clarity that only came in late autumn. I stood outside the bar for a moment, looking up at the stars and thinking about everything that had happened over the past few months. 6 months ago, I'd been a married man with a comfortable life and a wife I thought loved me. Tonight, I was divorced, alone, and the subject of gossip in every coffee shop and beauty salon in town. But I was also free. Free from lies, free from betrayal, free from the constant nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right in my life. For the first time in years, I knew exactly where I stood and exactly who I could trust. It was a good feeling. As I drove home to my empty house, my house now, bought and paid for with the sweat and sacrifice of someone who understood the value of loyalty, I thought about what Murphy had said. Some people thought I'd gone too far, that my revenge had been too thorough, too complete. But those people had never been betrayed by someone they'd trusted with their heart. They'd never had their life's work threatened by people who thought they were too weak to fight back. They'd never been humiliated in front of everyone they knew by someone who was supposed to love them. I had, and I'd made sure it would never happen again. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like home, my home, a place where I could be honest, where I didn't have to pretend everything was fine when it wasn't, where I didn't have to wonder who was lying to me. As I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, I raised an imaginary glass to the darkness. To new beginnings, I said aloud, and to people getting exactly what they deserve. Somewhere in Portland, my ex-wife was probably lying awake in a strange bed, wondering how her perfect plan had gone so wrong. Somewhere in Boston, her former lover was probably staring at his laptop, sending out resumes and trying to rebuild a career I'd systematically destroyed. But here in my house, in my life, everything was exactly as it should be. Justice had been served. The guilty had been punished. The betrayed had been vindicated. And Miles Turner, firefighter, survivor, and architect of the most complete revenge our small town had ever seen, was finally at peace. Some fires, I'd learned, were worth letting burn.